In a time marked by so many ruptures, silent violence, and selfishness disguised as progress, Pope Leo XIV raises his voice with gentleness and firmness to remind the world of the most essential truth of the gospel. Love your neighbor as yourself. But this love, for him, is not mere sentiment, nor an abstract idea. It is practice, it is sacrifice, it is daily choice, it is seeing others through God's eyes. In this video, we will explore 10 profound lessons on loving your neighbor from Pope Leo XIV, drawn from his homilies, messages, and concrete gestures since the beginning of his pontificate. If you wish to grow in true love, build more human relationships, and transform your faith into action, stay with me until the end. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share this message with all who desire to live the gospel more deeply. Let's begin. Lesson 1. Loving your neighbor means recognizing the divine dignity in each person. Since his first speech as pontiff, Pope Leo XIV has insisted that loving your neighbor begins by recognizing them as a child of God. He affirms that every human being, regardless of their appearance, belief, origin, or condition, carries within themselves the mark of the Creator, and it is this recognition that should guide all our attitudes. The Pope teaches us that it is impossible to truly love if we do not first see others through the eyes of Christ, eyes that do not focus on appearances, but that penetrate to the heart. He warns that we live in an era where human dignity is constantly threatened by indifference, by social exclusion, by prejudice. Therefore, the first conversion that love demands is that of our gaze. Loving your neighbor, according to Leo XIV, is learning to see God in others, especially in those whom the world prefers to ignore: the poor, the elderly, the sick, immigrants, the forgotten. This lesson challenges us to reconsider our relationships. How have I been looking at others? With compassion or judgment? With welcoming or indifference? The Pope states clearly, no one can say they love God if they despise, reject, or ignore the person who crosses their path. Lesson 2. Love for neighbor manifests itself in concrete action. For Pope Leo XIV, love cannot be just beautiful words or pious discourse. It is, above all, commitment. Love is measured by the willingness to serve, by the readiness to help, by the effort to alleviate another's pain. He reminds us that Christian love has hands, has feet, has an agenda. One doesn't live by intentions, but by attitude. Leo XIV constantly cites the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25, as the rule of Christian life. I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. For him, this passage is not spiritual poetry, but an examination of conscience. It is the portrait of the final judgment, the mirror of authentic faith. The Pope challenges us to live a love that goes beyond the limits of personal comfort. A love that reaches out to others even when it's tiring, even when it's uncomfortable, even when there is no visible reward. He affirms that Christians should be God's presence in the lives of others, not through grandiose action, but through faithfulness in small things. This lesson provokes us to act. What have we done today that could be called love? Whom have we touched? Whom have we listened to with patience? Whom have we forgiven? The Pope says, love for neighbor is the only currency that will have value in the kingdom of God. These first 2 lessons, recognizing the dignity of others and loving through concrete gesture, already show that Pope Leo XIV's path is demanding but profoundly evangelical. It is not about a generic and idealized love, but a love that draws near, that kneels down, that serves, that allows itself to be transformed. Loving your neighbor according to him is the proof that faith is alive. It is the mark of an authentic Christian. It is the bridge between God and wounded humanity. As we reflect on these words, we are invited to move beyond ourselves and allow the gospel to become flesh in our relationships with those around us. Because, as Pope Leo XIV says, love for neighbor is not just a commandment, it is the visible face of our love for God. Pope Leo XIV has consistently reminded us that love for neighbor is not a virtue reserved for saints or for a select few with a calling. It is a universal vocation. It is the DNA of a Christian. For him, one cannot understand the gospel or be a disciple of Jesus without loving. Love for neighbor is the criterion that separates a mature faith from a sterile one, a living church from a dormant church. We continue then with two more profound lessons that help us put this love into practice in the real world. Lesson 3. Loving your neighbor means being willing to listen with the heart. One of the greatest forms of charity, according to Pope Leo XIV, is listening. In times of constant noise, speed, and superficiality, truly listening has become rare, and for that very reason, revolutionary. The Pope teaches that listening is an act of love. When we listen with our hearts, we are telling the other person, "You are important, your pain matters to me, your life touches me." And he warns, often, people don't need ready-made advice or quick answers. They just need someone to listen to them without rushing, without judgment, with compassion. Leo XIV recalls that Jesus, before healing, listened. Before teaching, he listened. Before forgiving, he listened. And this listening, attentive, available, generous, is an essential part of his ministry of love. He invites Christians to be more sensitive to the stories hidden behind each face. Behind each harsh expression, there may be a wound. Behind each silence, a loneliness crying out for help. This lesson challenges, do we listen with our hearts or just with our ears? Are we willing to make ourselves a welcoming presence in someone's life, or do we close ourselves off in our routines and distractions? The Pope exhorts us, those who love, listen, and those who listen, transform. Lesson 4. True love transcends religious, political, and social boundaries. For Pope Leo XIV, Christian love knows no wall. It is called to go beyond borders. And the mature Christian is one who can love beyond their preferences, doctrines, parties, or ideologies. He affirms that, often, the greatest challenge of love is to cross the boundaries of my group, my vision, my safe space. It means loving also those who think differently, who profess another faith, who are part of another world. Love for neighbor, according to Leo XIV, is not restricted to the circle of those who are close to us or dear to us. It should especially reach those who disturb us, challenge us, oppose us. The Pope reminds us that Jesus loved Samaritans, tax collectors, rejected women, Roman soldiers, and even those who crucified him. His love was radically inclusive, and this is the model to be followed. He also warns that when we restrict our love to what is comfortable, we are reducing the gospel to our own image. And this is a dangerous risk, creating a custom-made Christianity that ignores the challenges and demands of true love. This lesson calls us to expand our hearts. Can we love those who are indifferent to us? And even more, can we love those who have hurt us? Those who disagree with us? Those who live outside our parameters? The Pope says clearly, loving only those who think like us is not Christian love. It is affinity. Christian love is recognized when it can cross the abysses. These two lessons, listening with the heart and crossing boundaries, lead us to a more mature, more courageous, more evangelical love. Love that listens generates healing. Love that crosses boundaries generates reconciliation. Pope Leo XIV shows us that loving is not just doing good. It is also allowing oneself to be touched. It is allowing others to change our perspective, our priorities, our rhythms. It is allowing another's suffering to become our responsibility as well. Because love for neighbor, when lived deeply, pulls us from the center of our lives and places us on Christ's path, the only true center. As we reflect on these words, we are invited to review our habits, our routines, the way we treat those around us. Because, as Leo XIV reminds us, love is not theory. Love is a path, and this path passes inevitably through others. Love for neighbor, for Pope Leo XIV, is not an accessory path within faith, but its non-negotiable center. He insists that no doctrine, tradition, or ecclesial structure can replace the commandment of love lived concretely. Loving is what identifies us as disciples of Christ. Loving is what defines our spiritual maturity. Next, we will delve into two lessons that point to the most demanding and transformative aspects of this Christian charity that is not content with the superficial. Lesson 5. Loving your neighbor means choosing sacrifice over comfort. Pope Leo XIV teaches that loving your neighbor, its purest form, implies sacrifice. It is not about offering what is left over, but giving what costs us. Love that doesn't wound the ego, that doesn't demand renunciation, that doesn't take us out of our comfort zone, is not yet evangelical love. He affirms that true Christian love is always sacrificial. It demands time, patience, detachment, and often silence. Truly loving means allowing the good of others to weigh more than our own convenience. The Pope recalls that Christ loved us not only with words, but with the cross. And therefore, Christian love cannot be romantic or superficial. It must carry something of the cross, something of discomfort, something of inner emptying. He insists that today's world needs Christians who love until it hurts, who are willing to give up privileges, time, attention, to alleviate the suffering of others, to accompany someone in loneliness, to be present where no one else wants to be. This lesson provokes us to reflect. Have I loved only when it's easy? Have I loved only those who please me, those who return gratitude? Or have I been willing to love generously, even when there is no return? The Pope declares, true love does not ask how much it will be loved in return. It simply offers itself. Lesson 6. Loving your neighbor means taking responsibility for another's pain. Pope Leo XIV warns that one of the greatest temptations of our time is neutrality, silence in the face of suffering, elegant indifference. Love for neighbor, according to him, requires involvement. It is not enough to feel compassion. We must act. It is not enough to see. We must intervene. He affirms that Christians do not have the right to be spectators in the face of pain. Where there is human suffering, Christ's disciple must be present, with listening, with an extended hand, with active prayer, with the defense of justice. Leo XIII recalls the parable of the Good Samaritan as the perfect image of committed love. The religious leaders who passed by before the Samaritan were not evil. They were just too busy. They simply did not want to get involved. But true love does not calculate. It draws near, touches, spends time, money, and energy so that the other person can rise. The Pope denounces the culture of indifference, where the suffering of others is tolerated as part of the urban landscape, and he calls Christians to be guardians of others, responsible, even if not guilty, for the pains that cross the world. This lesson questions us. When I see an injustice, do I react or remain silent? When a family member is downcast, do I draw near or hide? Have I taken on another's pain as my own? Or do I preserve myself to avoid getting tired? Francis already said, whoever does not weep before the pain of their brother has not yet understood the gospel. Leo XIV takes up this truth with pastoral and fraternal intensity. He concludes, Christian love is not blind. It sees and commits itself. These two lessons about sacrifice and responsibility show us that loving your neighbor, in Pope Leo XIV's vision, is much more than a gesture of kindness. It is a life choice. It is a daily abandonment of selfishness and an ever deeper immersion in the mystery of the other. Loving demands renunciation. Loving demands involvement. And the closer this love comes to the pain of others, the closer it comes to the heart of Christ. As we reflect on these words, we are called to move from discourse to practice, to go from affection to action, to allow love to cost us something: time, energy, surrender. Because, as Leo XIV reminds us, to truly love is to allow the life of another to have weight upon our own. Love for neighbor, as Pope Leo XIV reminds us, is an art that is learned with Christ and practiced every day. It is not theorized in speeches, but embodied in the small and great gestures of each journey. The lessons he offers us are an urgent call to coherence. Believing in God is loving your neighbor. You cannot separate one from the other without wounding the heart of the gospel. We continue now with two new lessons that deepen even further this demanding and liberating path. Lesson 7. Loving your neighbor means renouncing hasty judgment. Pope Leo XIV clearly denounces the human tendency to judge others based on appearances, isolated words, fragments of story. According to him, true love is patient. and patience begins with the effort to understand before condemning. He teaches that, often, we judge based on assumption, without knowing the context of another's pain, without knowing what lies behind an attitude, a choice, a silence. Love for neighbor requires the humility to recognize that we don't know everything, and that others are always deeper than their appearance or their apparent mistakes. The Pope affirms, "Judgment kills where love could heal," and he adds, "Judgment distances where love could welcome." For him, Christians are not called to be judges of the world, but leaven of compassion. Leo XIV insists that there is a subtle way of judging that hurts as much as harsh words. It is the cold look, the absence, the silent contempt. Therefore, loving your neighbor also means training your gaze, disciplining your thoughts, silencing the impulse to categorize others. This lesson questions us deeply. Have I judged easily? Have I offered space for others to explain themselves, to grow, to change? Or do I close myself in the hardness of my opinions? The Pope invites us to exchange judgment for intercession, to see the error of others not as a reason for criticism, but as an occasion to pray, to forgive, to accompany. And he concludes, "Judging distances, loving draws near, and only those who draw near can touch the heart." Lesson 8. Loving your neighbor means sharing who you are, not just what you have. Pope Leo XIV recalls that authentic charity is not just in the gesture of giving things, but mainly in sharing one's own life. Often we offer what we have, money, food, time, but we protect ourselves from giving what we are, our listening, our presence, our humanity. He insists that Christian love cannot be outsourced. Giving alms, making donations, contributing to charitable works are beautiful and important, but the essential is the encounter, the sharing of being. Christ did not only give bread to the hungry, he gave himself, and he teaches us to do the same. The Pope denounces that, in the name of efficiency, we create structures that distance us from direct contact with those in need. And he warns us, if charity does not involve me personally, it is not yet Christian charity. He affirms that there is a hunger greater than that of the body, the hunger for meaning, for company, for dignity, and that many of those around us don't need things but attention, time, a living word. This lesson challenges us to evaluate our practices. How have I loved? Have I shared only resources or also present? Have I offered help from a distance? Or have I allowed myself to be touched and transformed by encounters? Leo XIV concludes firmly, the world does not just need generous Christians, it needs present Christians, Christians who know how to be there. These two lessons, renouncing judgment and sharing who you are, reveal a mature, demanding, liberating love. Loving, for Pope Leo XIV, is more than doing good. It is becoming a good for others. It is allowing others to occupy space in your own life. It is giving up the harsh gaze and distant giving to enter the sacred ground of real encounter. Love that does not judge heals old wounds. Love that shares humanizes and evangelizes. As we reflect on these words, we are called to live a more courageous love, closer, more similar to the love of Christ, who never judged to exclude and who always gave himself with his whole heart. Because, as Pope Leo XIV teaches us, those who love with the heart of Christ see more deeply, walk further, and transform what they touch. As we advance through the words and teachings of Pope Leo XIV, what becomes increasingly clear is that love for neighbor is not an appendage of Christian life. It is its vital center. Everything in the life of faith must lead to love and spring from it. The Pope has been tireless in repeating that, without love incarnated, concrete, and faithful, all devotion becomes empty. We now conclude this journey with the last two lessons, which point to the deepest and most transformative dimension of love, forgiveness and constancy. Lesson 9. Loving your neighbor means choosing to forgive even without reciprocity. Pope Leo XIV affirms that forgiveness is one of the highest and most difficult expressions of love. Forgiving requires courage, faith, and humility, but it is also the surest path to inner freedom. He observes that many people live trapped in the past, nursing grudges, resentments, old wounds. This poisons the heart, weakens relationships, and blocks God's grace. The Pope teaches that Christian forgiveness does not depend on the repentance of the other. It does not wait for the offender to apologize, nor for full human justice. Forgiveness is, above all, an inner decision, freeing oneself from the weight of hatred, offering the other a chance to start again, entrusting definitive justice to God. He warns that the world often celebrates pride, not taking any disrespect, getting even. But the gospel teaches us the opposite path. Turn the other cheek. Forgive 70 times 7. Do not be overcome by evil. Leo XIV insists that forgiving is not forgetting, but transforming the wound into a seed of peace. And that no one loses by forgiving. On the contrary, those who forgive free themselves. This lesson challenges us to look at our stories. Whom have we not yet forgiven? Who still occupies a space of pain in our heart? Are we waiting for others to change? Or have we decided to love like Christ, who forgave us while we were still sinners? The Pope concludes, forgiveness is the purest form of love, because it loves even without return. Lesson 10. Loving your neighbor means persevering in love when everything invites abandonment. Pope Leo XIV teaches us that true love is revealed not only in heroic gestures, but in daily faithfulness. To love is to remain. It is continuing even when the other errs, when the response is cold, when the result seems nil. He affirms that there is a constant temptation to give up on love. In family relationships, in friendships, in community, in spiritual life. When we don't see immediate fruits, when we feel hurt, tired, or ignored, everything in us wants to retreat, protect ourselves, give up. But the love of Christ, says the Pope, is persevering. It does not give up. It loves to the end. And this should be the model for Christians. Leo XIV observes that there are people who need love for a long time before they change, that there are hearts so wounded that only the constancy of goodness can heal them, that there are situations that are transformed only when someone chooses to love, even without seeing return. This lesson is an invitation to spiritual maturity, to love even without being understood, to love even while being rejected, to love even while tired, to love until love wins. It calls us to review our attitudes. Have we loved only when we are well received? Or have we embraced the cross of a love that persists, even when everything seems to say it's not worth it? The Pope firmly summarizes, Christian love is not an emotion. It is a decision renewed every day, even when the heart is tired. These last two lessons, forgiveness without reciprocity and perseverance in love, deeply conclude Pope Leo XIV's teaching on love for neighbor. To love is to let oneself be wounded without returning the wound. To love is to continue offering bread where only stones have been received. To love is to continue even when everyone else has stopped. As we reflect on these words, we are challenged to live a Christianity more radically faithful to the heart of Christ. A Christianity that is not nourished by consolation, but by decision. A Christianity that does not expect applause, but insists on loving silently, perseveringly, mercifully. Because, as Pope Leo XIV reminds us, only persevering love has the power to change the world. And before changing the world, it changes our soul. May we today ask for the grace of a love that forgives and perseveres, a love that reflects God's own love, eternal, faithful, tireless. And may, at the end of our journey, when all words have fallen silent, we be recognized not by what we said, but by how much we loved.